Hey everybody, just wanted to do another one of these quick rundown videos. So you can see I've got Andean Abyss here. Just came out from GMT, designed by Volker Runke. I just got this from the P500 program, sat down and played my first solitaire game. I will probably do a regular review of this later on once I get a chance to play it multiplayer. The game does take a little bit of time. My first solitaire game played about 4 hours. But that was the first play, kind of slogging through the rules, etc. So when you play solitaire, you actually play as the government here. And you can see here you got 4 player aid cards there. And so let me just open these up real quick here. So you got the government on one side, and then the AUC and the cartels, and then on the back side we've got the FARC, or the communists here. So each player is going to get one of these normally in a 4-player game. And then they have basically, you can see there on the left-hand side you got Rally, March, Attack, and Terror. Well, those are the operations that you can do in the game. And those are the 4 operations that any of the players except the government can do. And then the government here, you can see he's got Train, Patrol, Sweep, Assault. And then on the right you can see a Special Activity. So if I zoom in just a little bit here, you can see if I chose to Train, I could then do a Special Activity of Airlift or Eradicate. So you're always usually going to be able to choose from doing an event and then an operation, and then sometimes you get to do like a little bonus special activity either during, before, or after the operation. And so like I said, there's 4 factions in the game, and when you do single player you're playing always as the government, and you're trying to keep the other 3 factions from winning, and then you're trying to win as well. Well, each faction has a different win condition. So if we look over here back on the victory thing here, so the government wins if the total support equals 60. The FARC wins if their total opposition plus bases is 25. And then the AUC wins if they have more bases than the FARC, which is quite interesting. And then the cartel wins if they have more than 10 bases and 40 resources. Well, the resources and the support and the opposition are maintained on this track here. So the total support for the government starts at 50. And then you need to get above 60, into 61. And so like I said, you've got these different factions all playing somewhat similarly, but with very, very different goals in mind. So how does the game work? Well, let's go take a look at these cards here. So you're always going to have 2 cards face up. So the one on the left there, let's say, is on top of the deck. The one on the right is the current card. Well, you can see you've got the 4 faction symbols there. And going from left to right, that's the order that they get to operate in. So that first card there, deserters and defectors. Okay, so the yellow faction, the UAC, gets a chance to go first. So they're going to move their marker to one of those boxes there on the left. So he may go here and he may choose to do the event like so. Then the next player down here, the green guy, he can choose to do basically the second one to the right of the yellow marker there. Now anytime you can pass and then get extra resources there. So you can see if you pass, you get +1 resource. Unless you're the government, you get +3. And what you're doing is looking at the next card that's coming up there on the left, the crop substitution. The thing that you're taking into account is what the event might be, what order you're going to operate in, what you might want to do, and you can kind of see what the first player does in that turn. So you can either pass or go. If you do anything, you're going to move over here to the uneligible box. So you're not going to be eligible for the next card. So at most you're going to operate every other card. So we're going to do the actions. And then basically you have the choice between doing the event or taking one of the operations I showed you earlier. So you can see on the left hand side there's actually 2 events. So the non-shaded area and the event on top there is actually going to usually help the government, and then the shaded area is actually probably going to affect the government. So you got to make a choice there between doing that and then some operations. And the operations are pretty numerous. So if I were to do a rules summary of that, it would probably take forever. But basically what you can do is you've got police for the government here in the light cubes, and then the dark cubes are the troops. And you can use them to basically try to get these little cylinders here, which are the different insurgent troops, off of these lines of control here, or lines of communication I should say, which provide, at the scoring round, they provide resources to the government every scoring round. And you've also got to maintain, if you're the government here, you can see the active support marker there in the middle. So in this case it's a ×2, so I'm getting 2 support points for that city there. Whereas over here you can see this one is a 3, and then I get times 2, so that one's actually giving me 6, and then the big city in the middle here is 8 times 2, so that's giving me 16, so I really want to lock that down or I'm going to be hurting. So the government's going to try to train people up. They're going to train them in cities, and cities are sort of these circle things here. They're like automatic bases for the government, and the government only has 3 actual bases, which are these discs here. And so you got to be real careful as the government player where you put these bases and where you get them out, because only where you have bases, or in the case of cities, can you increase your active support. And then over here on the track, that's going to increase or decrease your total support when those go away. So the objective of the government, again, is to increase their support. So everything they need to do is basically focused around that. Now the FARC, you can see there has an active opposition there, times 2. So the goal of the FARC is to increase their total bases, which is down here at the bottom. And you can see you load the bases from right to left, so we can easily tell how many bases they have, as well as the UAC bases down there at the bottom. So the FARC is wanting to increase their bases and their total bases and opposition out here on the board. And you want to look over here on the score track, they want to get it above 25 into 26. And so all the time the government and the FARC, the leftists, are trying to, go at each other. But meanwhile, trying not to let the UAC ninja the FARC bases, because the UAC's victory condition, they just need to have more bases than the FARC. Now the UAC is really interesting because they don't have a good way of generating resources very often. So they're going to be kind of low on resources, and they're very, very much a small guerrilla force, and it's very interesting to see how they play out. So that's the UAC. And the last thing here we've got is the cartel, and these are the drug dealers. Okay, and so these guys have a ton of bases that they can get out, and they can get them out through their actions relatively quickly and cheaply, and they generate a ton of resources. So at the end of each scoring phase, which is a propaganda card, so you can see this is the game just finished. I pulled the last propaganda card, and I won, by the way, so I probably played something wrong. But every propaganda phase you're going to check victory. You're going to check all those victory conditions which I explained, and then you're going to figure out who has control in the spaces. Now control is only considered for the government and the FARC. And then so once you do that, then the government and FARC can take some action, spend some resources to increase their, in this case, active support that's already maxed out, and then you can try to adjust it that way. And then everybody's going to get resources. Well, the interesting thing is these little lines of communication here are going to provide resources to the government unless they've been sabotaged. So if during the round or at the end of the round they've been sabotaged, usually by the FARC, so if the FARC may have a guy in there and then sabotage it, then you're going to subtract whatever that line of communication was from the resources. So basically you get 30 minus all the sabotage ones. And so if you go up here to the north, you can see some of these are pretty vital. There's were 3, 3, and 2. And so they're going to get resources, the government is, based on that, whereas the FARC and the UAC are going to get a resource for each base on the field, and then the cartel is going to get 3 times for each base on the field. So they all play really differently. And I could say that the solitaire game is a blast to play. It's sort of a mix between a sort of a States of Siege and sort of a card-driven game, maybe like Twilight Struggle or Labyrinth. You really got to keep in mind what's coming up next, and in trying to figure out, okay, the game's sort of going to play you a little bit with the solitaire. So there's these flow charts here. So you got a sequence of play over here, and then there's 2 flow charts, because if you're playing like a 2 and 3 player game, then you also will use sort of like the computer player, the AI players. So these flow charts are really nice, and I found them a little bit easier to intuit over Labyrinth. So most times they're going to try to do the event, and then you're going to take a look at this chart, and they're going to rally and march and do terror actions. And so you let those happen. So you kind of see how the game unfolds in the solo game, and then kind of react to that. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense sometimes. It keeps it sort of chaotic, which is nice for a solo game. So it does remind me of States of Siege, where you kind of draw the cards, and instead of like just advancing armies up, you're doing different actions based on the flow chart, and then you've got to react to that. And so you're only going to be able to usually act every other turn, like so. But I will say there's a lot of cool little thematic things. So the way that the guerrillas, the cylinders, will rally and then try to establish a foothold in these different forested areas, and then create bases so they can get more resources and things like that. And the way that the police work is different than the troops. You'll have to keep that kind of stuff in mind. The police kind of stay wherever they're put for the most part, and then at the end of each scoring round, the troops got to retreat back to any bases or cities. The other cool little neat things here are you can see the election, and that's going to change things a little bit at the end of each scoring round. Some different things will happen. There's aid here, so anytime you do sort of as the government actions to hinder the drug trade, your aid is going to go up, basically aid from the United States on the war on drugs, and that's going to help you generate resources at the end of each round. So I can say there's a lot to it, and I will probably do a review that's more in depth at some point. I want to get some face-to-face plays in with the full boat of people. The game is not really that complex. It's a heavy game, but to kind of go over the rules and each detail, okay, what does train mean, and then what does airlift mean, and then I can look at all the different idiosyncrasies for each of the factions here. Like the cartels can rally, and then they can maybe cultivate or process, which is get drug shipments or bribe. Whereas, the insurgents, the AUC here, can rally, and then they can maybe extort or assassinate down there. So they're just, there's little wrinkles here that would take a really long time to explain, but they're played pretty straightforward once you get the hang of all those different operations, and that's really going to be the key, is getting a hang of how those operations work. The events themselves are pretty self-explanatory. So it's really going to be about setting yourself up to generate resources, to get a sort of a stronghold, and to activate the guerrillas. So you can see if the guerrilla activates, he's going to flip up to the upside with the star, which he has got to do some of the more deadlier actions like cause terror and cause sabotaging of the lines. But that's going to make them susceptible to government removal, because if they're face down, they're sort of like hidden in the bushes, and they can't be found. So there's just a really, really cool game. I think I'll do another review, like I said, with some more of my thoughts. You can see the components, the graphic design, everything is really well laid out. It's very easy to take in, sort of the state of the game, and with all the board, how many bases do people have left, where exactly they are with the number of resources. Very visually, you're able to tell how many more resources, let's say the FARC and the government have over each other. You're able to see this little mechanism is just really cool, because you may take the faction option here and not take a special activity, just because you know that whoever's going to follow you is going to be limited in their options, like so. Because you maybe want to take the event because it's better, but you don't want to give them the full capability on their turn. And so that's really kind of the neat aspect of the game. So I just wanted to give you guys a quick rundown of the sort of the gist of the game, and kind of show you the components a little bit. So anyway, I hope you enjoy it. Thanks.